You're listening to the Health and Happiness Podcast with Travis Kemper and
Lauren Maxwell. Each episode, we share easy to implement strategies to improve your health, happiness, and overall quality of life.
There is only one thing that makes a dream impossible to achieve: the fear of failure. Paulo Coelho, The Alchemist. How's it going, Travis?
Good. We went up and hiked in the mountains yesterday. We used our new GPS. I think I talked about that. Duke got lost the last time that I went way up there. So we used the GPS so that we don't lose him.
Good.
It calculated, it tracks his hiking, which I thought was kind of cool.
Oh, that's cool.
Because I've always wondered, I know he hikes way further than we do because he runs off like a nut job.
Yeah.
But yesterday he did a little over 10 miles to our 4.25.
Wow.
Yeah. During the hike, we saw a small group of elk, which is 2 times in a row when I've taken Duke, which is shocking because, Duke. So yeah, that was cool. And then we saw a large black bear on the drive in, which was also really neat.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So much wildlife.
I know, it's great. And it's so green. Like everything up there, it's so wet this year. And it's so green. It's so awesome. How's it going, Lauren?
So beautiful. It's going great. We had some friends up yesterday, and Keely had a fun play date meeting her fur cousin, aka one of my best friend's puppies. They got along great. It was their first time meeting each other. Sadie is I think 9 months old, and Keely's 2. So we were like a little nervous for like the puppy energy, because this dog is like non-stop. But she's like a lab and husky mix, so she's a lot of energy.
It doesn't stop ever.
But they got along really, really well. We got to take them to the lake, and Keely taught Sadie how to swim, and they had so much fun, and we were like excited and screaming and like it was great. And now Nolan and I are getting ready to go on our vacation, and we're so excited. So lots of good stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Have fun. Are you flying or driving?
We're flying.
That's nice.
Yeah, because I drive a lot anyway, back and forth to Phoenix and out to my job. And so driving does not feel like vacation to me. So we are flying, even though California is not that far away.
That's okay. That'll be nice.
Vacations are vacations. So I like airports and airplanes. And I talked about that on the podcast before. I love airports and I love airplanes. So that is like something I just get really giddy about. I can't wait. I'm so excited.
Well, that's cool because I feel like most of us find them to be a hassle.
Oh, I know.
Like I acknowledge that it's amazing that I can get from here to, Pennsylvania in like 5 hours, but I still find it a hassle and it's an uncomfortable seat. I should be more grateful about the advanced technology that allows me to fly.
Just fly with me more often. Your whole opinion will change.
My whole experience will be different.
It's so wondrous. It's so amazing. Even like being in the airport. I just love being in the airport, like walking around, watching people. It's just fun. I love it. Every part about flying, I love.
Awesome.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, to start, I have a little story about fear. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you probably know that my wife and I invest in real estate. We bought our first property in September of 2019 with the plan of renovating it and then using it as an Airbnb. So first, before we even closed, we were bombarded with outsiders trying to scare us about the area, the house, and the overall market. They said things like, the market's about to crash. You won't be able to keep it rented. And then even the house, which we bought while working in another state, is in the ghetto. That was something that we were literally told. We almost pulled out of the deal due to other people warning us about things they had honestly very little experience with. We had some serious buyer's remorse, and stress definitely took a toll on us. And then, like I said, we bought it in September 2019 with the plan of making it an Airbnb. And I don't know if anybody remembers, but 2020 happened. And while it may seem like a long time ago now, the headlines at that time, 5 months after we purchased, were all fear-mongering about the economy, the housing market, death, everything. And in addition to that, Airbnb basically stopped in its tracks with the lockdowns. So why do I bring this up? Fear almost stopped us from accomplishing what we have accomplished. If not for that first property, there's no way we would be living where we live due to the affordability. The average house here is over $1 million. There's no way we would have bought our homes that we have here because I couldn't justify spending $500,000 on a risk that the market might crash. Who knows?
Yeah.
So we most certainly wouldn't own 2 properties here, and it's very unlikely that we would have owned one. We had a plan. We worked it as best we could. We adjusted it when we needed in Phoenix, and when we bought that first house. If we would have given into the fear, we would have procrastinated likely forever. I feel like we often think we need a perfect plan and to know everything before we take action. But there is no perfect plan. You can't predict what's going to happen exactly. You definitely can't predict the pandemic or the lockdowns or the craziness that has happened since.
Yeah, I mean, you can't predict the future. Future will always be different than we expect it to be.
Right. So today we're going to talk about the fear of failure and the costs it can have for you, as well as how you can get over it.
Yeah, I think all of these episodes that we have done recently kind of tie into each other. So this made some logical sense for us to go over. So, the fear of failure in a particular endeavor is experienced by most people in one way or another, but a rational and extreme fear of failing or facing uncertainty is a phobia known as atychiphobia. The fear of failing is also linked to anxiety or mood disorders that affects one's mental health and quality of life. Irrational fear of failure could be caused by a traumatic event that a person experienced in the past. This traumatic experience can make a person doubt their abilities, making them believe that they are not good enough to try new things. We'll go a little bit more into like what may cause it too a little bit later. This may also be related to being a perfectionist, which we talked about in episode 74 a few weeks ago.
So failure is a stepping stone for achievement. It helps you learn from your mistakes and can propel you to move forward. If you fail at something, it does not mean that you have to stop there. Think about a kid. I use this analogy with my patients all the time. Think about a child. When you have a child and they're trying to do anything, whether it's throw a ball, walk for the first time, stand for the first time, they fail over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And they keep watching everybody else and seeing what they do. And I assume they're like, I want to be able to do it that way. I want to throw a ball like mom or dad. I want to walk like mom or dad. I want to stand and not fall on my head. But they keep falling on their head until eventually they don't. But they fail 1,000 times before they succeed.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think that like one of the hardest things, this is one of the hardest things, at least for me, about school, at least in the younger years and the younger school mindset. In my adulthood, I've learned that fear of failure is a really important thing and a really valuable thing, but that doesn't necessarily make it any less scary. I still hate it. But I think that part of it is because failure or failing, aka getting an F, is always seen as a bad thing in the school system. We are conditioned to not want Fs. And yes, while I understand that no one should want to fail necessarily, we also shouldn't make it into this terrible, horrible, scary thing, because I feel like this is a part of what shapes our fear of failing outside the classroom as well. This negative connotation of F is bad. At least that's my experience. I wish we instead talked about the benefits of failing and learning from failure rather than just making it something we all want to avoid. If you're trying new things, if you're trying challenging things, things that are out of your comfort zone, odds are you're probably not going to avoid failing at it all of the time. But if our fear of failing is if our fear of failure is encouraged, then the likelihood of us staying in our comfort zones is high.
Yeah, well, and in the school system, which if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I hate the school system. I went through it for a lot of years, but I absolutely hate it. But literally in the school system, if you were like Lauren was, and like I was for many years, you were actually separated, and you were in like literally they would put you in a smart group, and then there was a not so smart group, and then if your classes are big enough, there is the F group, like there's the failure group. Get them out of here. We don't want them tainting the other kids. So literally they're telling you that it's completely bad and you're not even useless in society. Is what they're telling you. And it may just be because you have dyslexia. You may just really struggle to pay attention to history. I can relate to that one. Luckily I figured out how to take tests. So risk factors for fear of failure. A perfectionist failed at something that had important consequences that really affected their job or life. So maybe they got fired. Maybe they got a C in a class and it kicked them out of the honors classes for the next year. Negative imprints from a childhood experience. An example would be failing an exam and your teacher embarrassed you in front of the class for it, or you were bullied by your peers because of it. These bad memories linger through adulthood and become a phobia. A traumatic event where you felt socially humiliated. This can discourage you from giving a presentation in front of colleagues or public speaking. I think that's probably a big one. Actually, I read a crazy statistic once upon a time. I wish I would have it off the top of my head, but something like 77% of people are more fearful of failing than anything else. Something like that. And I know that, you know, 77
like dying or something. I think that's
yeah. And I know 77% of statistics are also made up or whatever, but on surveys, people are extremely afraid of public speaking. When your self-perception depends on how others see you and you don't want them to look at you as a failure, this belief can lead you to have an extreme fear of failure. And individual definitions of failure. So some people look at achievement as I have to do it exactly this way, and that's the only way it's successful, and anything else is a failure as well, instead of looking at life as in everything is in the gray. Like there's no one success and one failure. Everything's in gray.
So some signs and symptoms. Signs and symptoms can be both physical and emotional. So some physical symptoms of fear of failure could include insomnia or sleepless nights related to overthinking and severe anxiety, stress causing chest pains, easily panic with symptoms of profuse sweating, digestive distress, joint and muscle pain, splitting headaches, and difficulty breathing when faced with unanticipated situations, feelings of constant fatigue and tardiness due to lack of motivation, tachycardia, which is increased heart rate, trembling, dizziness, and lightheadedness. Some emotional symptoms can include insecurities and excessive worrying about what will happen if you fail or things go wrong, procrastination to avoid work or task assigns or any task assigned that triggers anxiety, lack of motivation that makes it difficult to start on projects and work towards goals, unnecessary rationalization of how something went wrong, exaggerated feelings of anxiety, fear, and panic when taking any sort of risk or new tasks with an outcome that you are unsure of, feeling a loss of control, helplessness, and powerlessness.
So how do you know if your fear of failure is holding you back? So here's some questions you can ask yourself. Do you believe that you don't have the skills necessary to achieve something? Do you feel like you are not enough, as we talked about in episode 4, negative self-talk? Do you tell people that you will probably fail something so that the expectations remain low? So if I tell Lauren I'm going to fail a test, Lauren's like, well, if he gets a C, he's doing great because he thought he was going to fail. Do you worry that you will disappoint others if you fail, or that others will think less of you? Do you procrastinate to the point that it affects performance or your ability to finish on time?
Oof.
Lauren, how common is fear of failure?
Well, we don't really know how common it is, but one study found that 37.5% of college students have a desire to reach out to counselors to help with their fear of failure in life.
That's crazy. So it didn't find that they had a fear of failure. It found that it was probably crippling,
right,
because they wanted to
reach
out to a counselor
mm-hmm.
to get it addressed.
Right. Was severe enough. Yeah, severe enough that 37.5%. So you can imagine like lower levels that aren't that severe, like how much more prevalent it would be.
Yeah, that's scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So impacts of fear of failure. Fear. So my mouth.
Ow now, brown cow.
Yeah, I have to do my like acting exercises. Fear of failure has many influences on the human body and mind. So cognitively, individuals who fear failure tend to suffer feelings of shame and a heightened sense of failure compared to those who do not fear failure as strongly. Perhaps the most popularly utilized strategy that increases the odds of failure is what's called self-handicapping. This is openly defined as placing an obstacle on oneself prior to performance, which has the purpose of protecting your self-esteem in the event of failure. So kind of what Travis was talking about earlier, like, oh, is that a good example, I guess, of like saying, oh, this is my worst class, or this is like, I'm going to fail this, or just setting an obstacle in your path almost, or I'm too busy to study for this test, but it's my worst class anyway, and this
basically you're making an excuse so that you don't even have to try.
Yeah,
because you're just limiting your ability for success by stating that, like, school's a good example. I'm not very good at this. I'm not very good at math, so I'm not gonna get a good grade in this class. And then you just don't study for that class like you would for your other classes that you do feel you're good at.
Yeah. Which basically can cushion the blow of failure, so it's not felt as terribly.
Yeah.
So fear of failure can also impact motivation and academic performance. In one study, they identified how fear of failure affects adolescents and their academic progress. In this study, the school subjects of German and math were compared to identify any correlations. The study found that the gender stereotype of females having higher test scores was not found in the study, as males and females had similar performances. It was discovered that fear of failure only affected females noticeably when dealing with mathematics.
Which is a different stereotype.
Yeah. Interesting.
Which is probably due to a different stereotype.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. They believe that they aren't as good as math as men, and therefore they aren't as good as math.
No, but they are. I mean, it said there's no there was no difference in the
I guess the fear is that
performance. But yeah, that's a common belief, especially in I mean the girls I grew up with, at least. Yeah. Often girls felt that they were worse at math than guys.
Yeah.
And we felt that we were better at math than we were in English, per se.
Yeah.
Or for example.
Which is funny. I mean, I definitely still felt that, and I was in like advanced math since I was a kid. Like, but I would still say that I'm not as good at math.
I would guess that also impacts later in life, like STEM fields.
Yeah.
Because math and science are usually related, because I was forced to go into the honors levels of science, which I hated. And because I was good at math. It was like, you can either take the math below the math you just took, or you can take the next step of math, but you have to take the honors science course. That was how my school worked. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't pursue any, I mean, I'm glad where I ended up for sure. But even when I was considering like fields, I was not considering ones that had anything to do with a lot of math. even though I was in advanced math since I was a kid.
Interesting.
But
That's
now I'm
very
terrible
interesting.
at math because I haven't practiced it.
Well, I
Anyway,
mean, yeah, that's relative.
yeah. Um, Fear of failure can also have an impact on relationships. So there's three types of attachment bonds: secure attachment, avoidance, and attachment anxiety. Avoidance occurs when one individual desires to maintain emotional distance from other people, so avoiding. Um, Attachment anxiety is when one feels the need for extreme closeness with another. They also possess a strong fear of rejection and abandonment. When neither of these, avoidance and attachment anxiety, are present or minimal, the individual is considered to be in a secure attachment, or in other words, they have a positive view on relationships. Both attachment avoidance and attachment anxiety have a common theme in that they are both caused by fear, whether that fear is rejection or of failure.
Interesting. So there's a study on undergrad students that looked to see if they could find any differences in the level of fear of failure between sexes, academic level, and GPA. The results clearly indicated a significantly higher level of fear of experiencing shame and embarrassment among the female students than their male counterparts. This is probably partially because there's this incorrect stereotype that females outperform males in school. Although they do get more college degrees. Results also showed that there were significant differences between the 4 academic level groups, freshman to senior, in the level of fear of experiencing shame and embarrassment, fear of important others losing interest, and fear of upsetting important others. Well, that makes sense. I mean, your bonds later in college are better, your friendships that have stayed.
Sure.
So that makes sense. This was especially true for students in the first academic level, more so than in the second, third, and fourth academic levels. Freshmen experienced more feelings of inadequacy and fear of failure. They're also dealing with a lot of change and they're in new places. So that's not all that surprising. Yeah, exactly.
It's a big life change.
The study also concluded that there were significant differences between the GPA level groups in the level of fear experiencing shame and embarrassment, fear of devaluing one's self-esteem, fear of having an uncertain future, fear of important others losing interest, losing your friends, and fear of upsetting important others. Students who experienced higher levels of fear of failure secured lower GPA and their counterparts who are more academically self-efficacious and less anxious about the future. I would have been in that second group.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But you had a higher GPA, and my guess is you had more fear of failure in school. So
I'm a conundrum. So coaches' motivational style and athletes' fear of failure. So like taking this into the sports realm. A sample of 340 athletes completed questionnaires related to fear of failure in sports, as well as their perception of the extent to which their coaches provided support for athlete autonomy and control. The results revealed a significant and positive relationship between coaches' controlling style and athletes' fear of failure, whereas coach autonomy support was associated with reduced fear of failure. That makes total sense to me.
Yep. So I think I've talked about my fear of failure in sports before in the podcast. When I look back at my childhood playing sports, fear completely overwhelmed me. My goals on the field were to not screw up. I wasn't even trying to win. The worst of it was in wrestling, where my goal was literally to avoid getting pinned. There was no thought of even trying to score points or pin the other kid. I was just attempting to stay off my back for the match. In a weird way, I was kind of successful in this goal. If you make your goals low enough, it's pretty easy to be successful.
Yeah.
You can hit them most of the time. I rarely got pinned. I think I got pinned twice in my wrestling career. I wrestled a lot of matches. Here's the thing. I probably only won 5 matches in my wrestling career. And the really crazy thing was it wasn't because I'm not athletic. I am athletic. And if we were outside of an actual sport, I was pretty good at most things. Now I hated wrestling, so that probably wasn't a good one. But I probably shouldn't have been in wrestling in the first place. But I was stronger than most people. I was fitter than most people, and in any sport, like if we did a just a sport for fun, I was pretty dang good.
Yeah.
The only kids that I beat in wrestling were substantially weaker than I was and had way less athletic gifts than I had. So I was able to just easily dominate them. But this lack of confidence and fear of failure continued to express itself in other areas of my life. I remember when I got a job serving tables, which I really shouldn't have got the job, but one of the football players' dad owned the restaurant. I was afraid of talking to people. So
what?
I was scared to death of talking to adults. Yes, I was a very different person than you met.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine you like that.
Yeah, so as a college dropout at 19, I dropped out and somehow got a job selling cars. Again, not a job I should have gotten. I had no connection there. Don't know how I got the job. So I got the job selling cars. And I remember I would avoid walking out to talk to a customer on the lot. Now, this is the only way you make money. And I actually did pretty decent. So I avoided walking out to talk to customers. And this wasn't like, oh, I did it once because I was feeling poorly or whatever. This was like I did it every day until the end of the month when I had to sell cars or else I was going to get fired.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was crazy. So the reason that I did that is one, I was afraid to talk to the person. In selling cars, they instantly hate you. But also I didn't want to walk back. So there's a walk of shame that you do if you don't get the patient the customer on like a test drive or something. There's this walk of shame where the manager is watching you walk back without the customer. And I didn't want to have to face my coworkers or boss knowing that I just failed. But there was no, I was never trying to get better at this point in my life. I was just trying to stay under the radar, keep my job, and that's what I did. So I had some gifts again, but I kind of wasted them.
Oh man. Well,
yeah.
I mean, I talked in detail about my experience with my sport, which is dance, on our, Perfectionist episode. So if you guys have listened to that, you can remember how I had a crippling fear of failure due to perfectionistic tendencies that basically led me to quit something I absolutely loved. Like, it wasn't like wrestling where Travis didn't like it, but I loved dancing. It still to this day is like my heart and soul. It's like one of my meditation. Like, I just feel so wonderful and alive when I dance, and I quit because I was too afraid that, there was either I wasn't going to make the dance team that I was going to audition for, or if I did make the dance team and I went to competition, that I was going to fail at the competition. I just paralyzed, crippling, and I quit. So
when I listened to you on the podcast read that, it gave me chills, not in a good way. I felt really bad.
Sad chills.
Yeah, it was terrible. You're a very good writer.
Thanks.
Yeah, so that helps. So Lauren, are we creating a world where young people are afraid to fail?
Well, a newspaper article from 2014 talks about the 10% decline in non-fatal injuries from 2002 to 2012, and a few books that came out at the time were written about the benefits of failure throughout history in creating success in science, business, and life. They argue that the fear of failing may be decreasing jobs, decreasing economic growth, and decreasing overall flexibility in the country. The writer talks about seeing this in their time in DC politics, where they saw polarization rising for several decades, and the fear of ostracization from your own party if you crossed lines for bipartisan policies.
Yeah, so this writer was talking about how they're looking at this as a win and everybody's celebrating, oh, there was 10% less fatal injuries or
non-fatal injuries.
Non-fatal injuries. So there's 10% less injuries. And they're saying, yeah, that's a good thing. We should be celebrating that the less kids are getting hurt. However, is it the fact that we're just getting rid of the monkey bars so kids aren't breaking their arms by falling off the monkey bars, and we're teaching the kids not to take any risks? So we're being the helicopter parent, I think was the term from the time, where you're constantly like, you see your kid running towards a curb and you're like, no, stop. Or anything they're doing that you perceive as dangerous, where they might fall and brush their knee, get a brush burn, whatever, you're yelling at them to stop. And is that crippling them for life? So that was it's just a different take on it. And I found it to be an interesting article. So how can we overcome the fear of failure? So there was a mindfulness study. They did 8 weeks of mindfulness-based stress reduction for 29 university students. And they found that group-based mindfulness intervention seemed to offer the participants more than just help with their specific presenting problem of academic evaluation anxiety. The participants described experiencing meaningful forms of change in different domains of their everyday life, including the process of developing capacities for inner calm and self-acceptance, the experienced impact of group processes in promoting self-acceptance, and the experience of learning mindfulness to master difficulties in academic contexts. So basically, they had a lot of benefits outside of just their fear of failure in the education system. Mm-hmm. We talked about mindfulness. I think it was like episode 8. We'll link to that one too. It's extremely powerful. Very powerful. If you're not doing it, I recommend it.
Yes, absolutely. It can help with so many things. So other ways to overcome fear of failure, understand why you are afraid. It always starts with like introspection and understanding where this comes from. Do a little assessment check on yourself and know the root cause of how you develop your fear of failure or what causes you to fear failing. Determine if your efforts are really leading you to success. So if you have behaviors like procrastination, identifying these self-sabotaging or destructive behaviors can help you change your mindset. Redefine your definition of failure. Find a silver lining from your past failures and turn them into lessons. Looking at failures as another life challenge to help you learn and not as a roadblock to your future is an effective way to overcome your fear. I would add to that realize that failure is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Face your fears. Repeated exposures to events that started the phobias can help anxiety subside. Permit yourself to fail. Examine your feelings and thoughts about failure. Expect the worst case scenario and believe that you will survive it. Change your self-talk. Believe you will survive it. Take control. Be the boss of your thoughts and the situation you are in. If you feel that the projects given to you are overwhelming, break them down into manageable chunks and know the decision process that will set you up for success. And then, as always, you could talk to a mental health professional to get some additional strategies and help you move through a lot of these strategies in more detail to overcome.
So challenge this week. Is there something in your life that you want to change or something that you want to achieve that you keep putting off due to fear of not being able to accomplish it or a feeling that you are not worthy? If you have something like this, write down the first 5 action steps you can take to move yourself forward towards your goals and put a deadline on each one of those steps for yourself. Great job today, Lauren.
Yeah, you too, Travis. This was fun.
So it's fun. Thanks everybody for listening. Lauren, have a great vacation.
Thank you. I'm excited to go and I'm excited to tell you about it when I get back.
Sounds good. Thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to listen to this episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode and are getting benefits from our content.
If your life is improving in part due to the information in this podcast, we would greatly appreciate you sharing the episode with your family and friends on social media and leaving us a review so we can continue to reach more people and improve the health and happiness of the community at large.
Thanks again, and we will see you next week for another episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast.